Because I thought we would do a little more hands-on learning at this point, since we've been a little bit abstract. And I wanted to share a little bit about how the student-centered funding is working at charter schools in South Carolina now, and really start with examples of mission-driven, school-based, student-focused decision-making that I do at my school. And so I'm the principal at Charleston Charter School for Math and Science. We're in our 11th year of operating. One of the things that we were able to do this year, because we've got autonomy from the district, we're sponsored by Charleston County School District, and we've got 560 kids, is we knew that we needed to do something else with reading intervention. About 40% at least of our kids come from district schools all over the county not reading on grade level. And so we looked at the data and tried to figure out what we needed to do for those kids. And we found a reading program that was specifically focused on kids reading at about the 11th to 26th percentile. And we were able to implement that. My peers at the district schools have to continue to wait 2 to 3 years sometimes to be able to implement something, even when they see that need, or they have to immediately roll out whatever's been mandated that year. So we've got that flexibility at the school level using our EIA, EFA funds to roll things out when we need to and where we see a need. One of the other things that can seem kind of mundane, but is our HVAC system. We had been contracting with the district for that. We're in a district building. Last year, I would say of 180 learning days in the building, every single day there was something going wrong with the HVAC system. The district had 6 employees for 80 schools, and all they could do was run around and put out fires. They had nobody doing any of the preventative maintenance that needed to happen. So we started looking at other vendors that could come in and help us. We got a few quotes on things when they came in. The pictures that they showed us, everything else, you would not want your children in a building that was not having that preventive maintenance done, I can assure you. This year, completely different learning environment. The teachers who were with us last year and this year, they've not had a single day where they could not teach in their classroom, and that was a serious issue last year. If you look at the Post and Courier, there have been several articles this year where the district's continuing to struggle. They cannot staff their HVAC department enough. They don't have certified people to even work. They've put very complex systems into their buildings, but they can't find the certified staff people to actually work on the systems that they've put in their buildings. So we were able to find a vendor that understood actually the system that the district had put into the building that we're in. And then the third thing that we were able to do, really with that student focus piece, is to adopt the pay scales that CCSD has adopted for their teachers for next year. And we did that back in December. The district adopted them back right before election time. Imagine that. We knew that we had to be proactive with that, so my board was able to adopt those in December so that we could also retain and recruit teachers effectively. So those are just some of the examples of why we think student-centered funding really helps us. We've got that flexibility. We need to make decisions for our school and our kids in the building. Just a real quick financial overview, and I gave you what I look at each month. So when I'm working on my budget, I look at this piece of paper here, and that's my payments from the district that includes state and local funds. And the way that it's calculated each year, you take the third line there, the audited net FY18 revenues. So I'm always paid on the previous year's revenues divided by the previous year's weighted pupils. And that's how I get to that $7,696. That's my base student funding, and that includes state and local effort based on general operating. And as it was alluded to before, there's definitely things that are taken out of that general operating number that I never see at my school, that my kids never benefit from. So that's definitely one of the funding gaps that's there. You take that $7,696 that's there and you bring it down into this formula. So, and this is what is truly student-centered funding, and that's that EFA piece that we've talked about this morning. For my typical middle school kid it's under elementary, I've got 241 kids that are coded out that way, and they're just weighted a 1. For my high school kids, it shows that I've got 124 there. But I've really got another 140 that are down at that bottom line there above the gray that's vocational. So another 140 of my high school students are there. It's an interesting number. We fought hard to keep that vocational Kate weighting in there a few years ago. When we were tweaking the funding formula, we started to realize that the schools really needed that money. One of the problems with that weighting is that actually all of my kids are taking a CATE class, but because I do block scheduling, I only get funding for half of those kids because they're only taking it in the spring or the fall. A school 2 miles up the road might be doing it a AB schedule, so they have it all year long in their schedule. They actually get to code all of their kids all year long as CATE vocational. We've tried to put this out many times to people here in this building and next door in the Senate building. So there's just these weird little inequities that we need to continue to weed out, because it really doesn't matter whether that kid's just in one semester or not. The same effort with that teacher, the same resources I need for the classroom. If another good line to look at is the autistic line. So that I've got 7 children in the building that they've got services for autism. And so that may mean a special ed teacher, that may be an itinerant aide that's with that child every day. I'm getting 2.57 times that base money for that child, plus some IDEA money. Right? My school gets about $100,000 in federal funds for IDEA funds to support those. That money will never meet what's actually coming out. So I'm taking money away from other kids in my building to make sure that those 7 kids are getting the services that they need as well. So looking at how to really fund that formula. We do contract with outside vendors for some of those services, and we contract with the district for some of those services, and the district and those vendors bill us. So we know what those actual costs are for those kids. On the bottom are all those the pupils in poverty numbers. So I've got the bottom line is I've got 312 kids that are pupils in poverty. So that gets multiplied out by that 0.20 weighting. So all in all, at my 45-day count, at the bottom I had 562 kids, but weighted with all these different weightings, I was paid for the equivalent of 796 kids based on all of those weightings. So that's true funding that we feel like is student-centered. The problem is, like, we've looked at that little web there, all of these other components that are in there, I sometimes get, I sometimes don't get. We budget about $300,000 in EIA funds that really represent those bubbles. Right now, at this point in the year, when I look at my February budget, I've gotten $128,000 of those $305,000 of dollars that I budgeted. So I'm still waiting on 58% of that money coming in at the end of February. So I've still had to provide all those services. Quite honestly, I've worked yesterday and the day before on reports that are due to the State Department for things that I've not even gotten the funding for yet. So when each of those little bubbles in my brain is little tiny buckets of money sometimes that I still have to spend hours and hours producing another report that quite honestly is data that the State Department already has or the EOC already has and others. So if we could streamline all of those different bubbles into bigger buckets, there'd be much clearer transparency on how the money's being spent, much clearer transparency on accountability and what the actual outcomes are right now. I honestly have no idea who's looking at all these tiny little reports that we have to send in every other week, especially this time of year. A lot were due last week. Other things around charter school funding specifically that I did want to hit on. For those of us that are charter schools in locally sponsored districts, most of us are not getting the Title I dollars that we're supposed to be getting. 53% of my kids are living in poverty. The district counts my kids, but I get 0 of those federal dollars. The statewide district and Erskine is passing those on to schools that hit that bottom threshold in the federal process, the 35%. Transportation costs, there are a handful of us in the charter schools that are providing transportation. We think it's a civil rights issue. I run 8 buses every day for about 400 kids. That's $415,000 out of my whole budget. Yep.
Could you say that again?
Yeah.
Did you say your district? So is that the Charleston County?
Charleston County School District for the Title I dollars. Their local plan, the threshold is usually right around 80%, and right now it might even be higher, might be closer to 90%. So any of their schools that have their pupil in poverty number is lower than that threshold, they're not going to get any Title I dollars. So my kids count for that number. So my district's getting in federal dollars, and I've talked to Lindsey Graham's office and Tim Scott's office over the years about it. That money's coming into the district, but it goes out to all the other schools. I'd be 100% okay with it if those kids were showing up to me in 6th grade ready to learn. They are so far behind. We've got kids coming to us 4 and 5 years behind reading levels and math levels. So.
That's one of the reasons that charter schools are transferring to the statewide district into Erskine is.
Yes, to get some of the, more of the Title I dollars. And you can see, I do point out, so my per pupil funding is higher than what the statewide district is right now. So my base funding's $7,696. Theirs right now is around $6,080 for a brick and mortar school. So I'm still financially, it makes sense for me to stay in Charleston County, obviously. And then also the next part is about facilities. And so our facility is owned by CCSD. We pay zero rent, but my peers in other charter schools are paying between $500,000 and $700,000 a year in rent or mortgage that's coming out of their classroom dollars. So we're very grateful to have that opportunity. We do spend about $220,000 on repairs and maintenance, about $500,000 to $600,000 overall on facilities costs in my budget. We were very grateful to be part of a sales tax facilities financing piece that CCS did about 5-6 years ago or so, maybe 7 years ago. So $25 million was spent on my building. I'm not part of having to pay that back, so that's a great win. Charter schools should be able to be part of that all of the time in the state. I paid zero for my asbestos abatement that had to be done this summer when asbestos was found, when I just wanted a simple thing painted. So, and CCSD was able to include that in capital fund. So very grateful for those things. That should happen across the state. That shouldn't just be because I'm in a district building and benefiting that way. And then I've already talked to the HVAC thing. Good outcomes too, when we've got some accountability at the school level with the student-based decision-making. We've got a 97% graduation rate. 100% of those kids that were pupils in poverty graduated with us last year. So we're one of 11 schools in the state where 100% graduation rate for pupils in poverty. And our African-American graduation rate's right there at 97% too, and it's 20% higher, 20 percentage points higher than the district average. Things that we think the student-centered funding would help in really kind of consolidating some of these pots is being able to drive more money towards supporting teachers and really some mental health supports that I think has been talked about this week in Columbia already. And then creating just innovative ways for engaging students that's not constrained by all the regulations and reports and everything, if we have more consolidated funding pieces. And then just creating more sustainability both for the South Carolina Public Charter School District schools in Erskine and the districts in general. When I talk to my peers in other schools where they're charter or traditional public, they really just want clear pathways to that sustainable funding. And obviously there are just things that we need to mitigate with the Act 388 over the years. And then other things that we need to figure out with community partners. It's not necessarily education funding, but we've got to figure out a way to strengthen South Carolina's families. These kids are showing up at our schools every day with so many more issues than just reading gaps. We need businesses and community leaders to help us value education and mentor youth. And then a big issue that's going to impact education moving forward is sustainable housing. Our teachers cannot afford to live in Charleston County, and our families are being displaced every day. We've got kids that are transient because the landlord kicks them out of one place and they just move from one place to another all year. So